In the basement archives of a Rhode Island museum, beneath the hush of tempered glass and layers of well-meant stone, sits a single-room colonial cabin dated 1793. It's no longer open to the public, and maybe, for good reason, the floorboards creak with an honesty typical of their age. The air kept at a sterile 68 degrees is unremarkable, except for one wall. That wall doesn't match. It has no visible grain, no seams, no nails. It's never cooled, never faded, never decayed. While the rest of the cabin ages as it should, this wall remains warm, as if someone or something is still standing behind it. Museum access logs offer little reassurance. Over the years, dozens of names have appeared on the sign-in sheet for this exhibit. The problem: none of them are staff. Some aren't real. Some have handwriting that doesn't match any known records. And disturbingly, some of these names have appeared before, not in the museum, but in colonial census books, ship ledgers, military rolls, architectural drafts, as if the wall has kept them. All official records describe the cabin as square. Always square. 4 walls, standard structure. But something has always been missing. Or maybe something never left, and it's still signing in. If you're still here, take a breath and light a candle. Because tonight, we're stepping into a house with a 5th wall. This is Sleepy History Tales. And if you're watching from somewhere distant, leave a comment your country and the time. There's comfort in knowing we're all out here, scattered across timelines, watching the same story unfold. Chapter 1. The Surveyor Who Couldn't Close a Square. In the spring of 1793, Ephraim Wells, colonial surveyor and crown-licensed land agent, arrived in northern Providence Township. His job was routine finish a backlog of property plats for crown deed finalization. Wells was meticulous. His journals preserved today in the Rhode Island Historical Cartography Collection read, like scripture for mapmakers. Neat weather notes, compass alignments, chain lengths, all recorded with the sharpness expected of a man trained to divide land, like scripture. But something changed on April 6th. Lot 14. A modest cabin. Ordinary woodland. Wells writes 1 cabin. 4 walls. Cedar siding. Sloping roof. Quiet. Routine. Until he tried to sketch it. The drawing wouldn't let him. He tried once and the ink pulled strangely. He tried again. Fresh parchment. Same problem. A 3rd time. Still the bottom right corner refused to join. Instead, it curved just slightly, creating a hidden angle beneath the cabin's base. A line he didn't mean to draw. A 5th point. His journal entry from the next day is terse, almost broken. Corner would not meet. Line would not return. Not my hand. Cartography standards of the time demanded precise joins, iron compass, chalk twine, clean corner angles. Deviations could be blamed on wind, dull lead, warped terrain, but not this. The original map recovered in 1842 from a fireproof folio shows that same odd distortion. The ink thins arcs and loops below the structure, like something buried under it. Like the land itself pushed back. The cabin, according to Wells, stood on a granite outcrop beside a bent pine tree, about 30 yards from an eastern marker stone. The structure, he notes, was intact. Nothing visibly strange, except for one thing. 4 present, declined names, polite. No names were recorded. No family matching that description appears in town records. No tax logs, no ledgers. It's as if they were never there except in the ink. The truly disturbing part, not the drawing, not the cabin, but the paper. When the plat was unearthed decades later by Dr. Thaddeus Cotter during a colonial audit, he noticed the ink on that one line. The curved one was newer, subtly different, modern ferric gall compound. Wells couldn't have drawn it. Someone added it after the map was sealed. But there are no initials, no edits, no recorded updates. Just one faint, precise curve that continues cleanly into the margin, as if the pen never lifted. Wells stopped working later that year. No resignation, no final report. Just one final note, dated August 3rd. House was square. It's the land that isn't. The sentence ends there. The page folds over. The bottom is stained with iron oxide, like something bled through. Years later, Wells' brass surveyor's compass was found tucked in a township bin. The dial still points north, but only when placed atop his original cabin sketch. Chapter 2. The measurements never match. The second entry in Wells' field book starts without comment. April 7th, 1793. Weather overcast. Soil damp. Elevation slightly unnatural in descent. At 6:42 a.m., Wells begins his second attempt to measure lot 14. He walks the perimeter. Once, twice, a third time. Every time he writes the same thing. 4 walls, rectangular structure, uniform wood grain, but the numbers, they don't agree. The northeast wall reads 21 feet 7 inches. Wells circled the cabin 3 times that morning. First pass 21 feet 7 inches. Second, 20 feet 11 inches. Third, 21 feet 7 inches again. On that third loop, he stopped, underlined the second figure, then wrote in the margin, second measure should not differ, compass steady, chain straight, no slope. The final version of the plat, the one preserved for official records, quietly omits the discrepancy. It lists only the 21.7 figure, neat, clean, unquestioned. But the original draft, stored in the Rhode Island Colonial Surveyor's Archive, tells a different story. There, beneath the strike-through, something was found decades later in 1996 under ultraviolet archival light. 2 layers. The number 2011 had been written twice, once in graphite, then overlaid in faint ink, perfectly stacked, like someone had retraced the same shape. But neither layer matched Wells' handwriting. His penmanship is distinctive, upright, sharp angles, a surveyor's precision. The mystery numbers had a subtle forward slant. The loop of the 2 was too tight. The rhythm, unfamiliar. No explanation was ever recorded. But Wells did leave one cryptic note. Third circuit produced dizziness. Felt certain of direction, but view seemed wrong. Trees did not move, but light did. This peculiar sentence was long dismissed by historians as a symptom of fatigue, dehydration, or vertigo common among surveyors. but it's the only place in all of Wells's surviving records where he treats light itself as a variable. The cabin, according to later engineering reports, was structurally sound. Every wall was load-bearing, each joined at proper angles. But when a reconstruction was attempted in 1911, the foundation wouldn't align. They tried squaring it. Northeast corner resisted, so the builders shaved down the joist by 3/4 of an inch. Oddly enough, the interior wall on the opposite side gained 2 inches. The structure moved, but not like wood normally moves. At some point, Wells's original surveyor's chain, brass iron-tipped, was donated to a town archive. It sat undisturbed for nearly a century. Then, in 1984, a curious museum curator included it in a public exhibit on early Rhode Island cartography. That's when something strange happened. When looped on a simple nail for display, the chain naturally divided not into 4 equal sections as expected, but into 5. Each segment matched one of the recorded wall measurements from the Wells cabin, except the last one. The 5th section, exactly 20 feet 11 inches. The figure Wells struck out. The measurement no longer found on the plat. And yet, it returned. Quietly, in pencil, scribbled on the back of the exhibit label. 2011 written twice. Faint, soft, same number, same weight, same pressure, different hand. Not a single museum staff member claims to have written it. Chapter 3. The 5th name. That same year, 1793, the Providence Township conducted a full census by mandate of the Rhode Island Assembly. Head counts, occupations, all by hand. Each ledger was recorded in duplicate, one for the county, one for the township. Both copies were signed by clerk Elias Branson, a man known for fastidious script, upright, precise, with a signature flourish in his lowercase r. Lot 14 appears without drummer. Abram H. Foster, farmer. Lydia Foster, wife Nathaniel Foster, son age 12. Elias Foster, son age 8. The ink is uniform. The spacing balanced. Township seal is pressed cleanly in the corner. Everything matches, until you compare it to the county copy. There the same names appear in the same order, but with one addition. Beneath Elias Foster, in slightly smaller text and separated by a faint dash, is a 5th name, Nora F. No role listed, no age, no note. Just Nora F. The ink is identical to the rest of the entry. There's no smudging, no overlap, no telltale indent suggesting it was added later. And yet, Branson's signature appears above her name, not below. There's no annotation, no asterisk, no correction. Only that quiet single addition. Nora F. She exists nowhere else. No tax record, no church record, no baptism, no school rolls, no burial, not even a trace in neighboring township registries. She appears only on one version of the 1793 census, and nowhere else in the entire historical record. Archivists noticed this in 1921 during a reconciliation project led by the Bureau of Historical Registers. At the time, it was dismissed as a clerical accident, a duplication, or a smudge. Maybe the parchment folded oddly. Then came 1978. A high-resolution stereo microscope was used during routine verification, and what it found beneath the name Nora F. changed everything. It wasn't just the name that unsettled archivists, it was how the ink behaved. Under high magnification, researchers noticed something unnatural. The ink forming the name Nora had penetrated the parchment deeper than the surrounding text. It didn't bleed. It sank like a wound pressed into damp skin. A forensic report filed in 1978 confirmed the strange behavior. Based on oxidation density, the ink forming Nora F was technically older than the rest of the census line, despite being added after. And yet, Branson didn't write it. There's no signature curl in the R, no confident sweep of the final A. The hand is neat, restrained, slightly off-center. It reads like mimicry, someone copying the shape of the letters without understanding their rhythm. 6 months later, in October of 1793, a separate township ledger quietly revisits the Foster family. Under a list of household trades and yields, their name appears again. 4 members, only 4. But at the bottom of the page, faint, almost invisible, a penciled note reads, Foster 5 confirmed. Branson unaware. No attribution. No explanation. The pencil used was later dated to 19th century American manufacture, decades newer than the original entry. And the note, it wasn't in the open. It was found folded, wedged between 2 blank pages, deep inside the ledger. Someone added it. But no one ever claimed it. Even the seal on the census folder had been pressed more than once. First in 1793, again in 1846. But oddly, the outer wax ring bore 3 separate impressions. Chapter 5. The Carpenter Who Heard the Wall Breathe. In late November of 1793, a local carpenter named Thaddeus Vale was sent to Lot 14 to repair storm damage reported by a neighbor. Not the Fosters themselves. The work order preserved in the Providence Tradesmen's Registry is brief. North corner sagging. Water ingress. Unsealed frame. Vale brought the usual, a satchel of iron nails, a hand plane, and enough salted bread for 2 days' work. He expected a simple roof repair. What he found instead has lingered like a cold draft in architectural journals ever since. His first notes are ordinary cedar siding, slightly warped by frost. Some minor buckling near the eaves, easily fixable. But once he stepped inside the cabin, his ledger entries shift in tone. He writes, east wall flush, floor to loft rail, no seam, no crossbeam, no end grain. For a trained joiner like Vale, this was wrong, unnatural. There were no dowels, no tongue and groove, no brackets. The entire interior wall was one unbroken face, continuous from baseboard to ceiling. Not painted, not paneled, just unjoined. He examined the grain pattern. Cedar typically spirals slightly when cut. But here, grain vertical for 7 feet. Abrupt stop. Loft edge. Above that point, the wood resumed a normal pattern. But that lower span, too perfect, too clean. Vale scratched the surface with his all-expecting veneer. The wood didn't mark. Not a scuff, not a dent, not planned, not surfaced. Uncarved. Cannot mark it. Frustrated, he stepped outside to measure again. The east wall aligned perfectly with the others. No bulge, no bowing, no trace of modification. And yet, inside, when he leaned his weight against it, The wall groaned, not the floor, not the beams. The wall itself gave a deep, taut sound like wood under stress, like a string pulled too far across a hollow chamber. Vale asked the Fosters about it. They remained still at the kitchen table. Obram Foster spoke once. We let it settle. Vale said nothing further. He patched the window frame but did not touch the wall. Instead, he marked it. He used charcoal to make 4 vertical measurement ticks 1 foot apart, then signed his name beside them. 6 years later, during a township inspection, the charcoal was gone. In its place were 5 horizontal marks burned shallowly into the wood, unevenly spaced, meandering. A 6th line had started at the edge of the floor, faint and half-formed. No burn residue, no tool marks, no logical heat source. And inside the cabinet, beneath the loft, inspectors found Vale's original awl placed carefully atop a folded canvas cloth. Its tip had been dulled, blunted, as if used repeatedly against something harder than wood. Something resisting. His name had been carved into the handle, but the letters were wrong. The T in Thaddeus was reversed. The final E was doubled. Vale never returned to Lot 14. But years later, his son, then a carpenter himself, drew the cabin from memory for a local history project. He included one detail his father never recorded: a 5th wall. No door, no seam, just a flat interior face where the light bent wrong. The Foster family ledger, perhaps the most baffling record tied to the house on Lot 14, wasn't preserved by careful curation. It survived by accident, by fire. In the summer of 1818, a lightning storm struck the Foster property. A barn adjacent to the cabin caught fire and burned to ash. When volunteers sifted through the wreckage the next morning, they discovered a small cedar box beneath the scorched beams, sealed with a leather strap, its corners still warm. Inside, untouched by flame, was a ledger. Bound in twine, its pages recorded no stories, just columns. Date, meal served, duties assigned, occupants present. It was at first glance a quiet record of daily life. Meals eaten, chores done. 4 names listed again and again: Abram, Lydia, Nathaniel, Elias. But every week across 47 pages, there was a 5th seat at the table. Sometimes left blank, sometimes not. In about a third of the entries, a name filled that space. Always different, never repeated, never explained. Some names were common: Judith, Samuel, Wren. Others were strange, too strange: Owl, Karen, Val. The handwriting remained constant. Same ink, same spacing. No corrections. No signs of childish play or later additions. Historians once assumed it was harmless. Maybe a poetic exercise, a game by the children. But in 1972, a local genealogist named Meredith Crail did something no one else had thought to do. She cross-referenced the names. She found every single one in the school records of the region. From 1793 to 1795, both Foster boys appeared regularly in township school logs, but their last names kept changing. March, Nathaniel Foster. April, Nathaniel Falk. June, Nathaniel Foreign. All 3 entries were signed by the same teacher, Miriam Chav. Her handwriting was rigid formal, She was known for perfect margins, no strikeouts, no flourishes, no guesswork, but she never corrected the surnames. In a private letter dated August 1794, found decades later, she wrote to her sister, "The Foster boys are clever and kind, but I do not know what to call them this month. I've taken to writing only their first names. No one corrects me." Her tone was weary, not fearful, but tired. Among her belongings was another letter never sent, folded into her hymnal. It read, "They never blink when I call them wrong." The line was underlined twice. Chapter 7. The fifth name. The folded ink. In 1991, while digitizing regional census anomalies, a clerk made a quiet discovery. Every name from the Foster ledger, the rotating fifth dinner guest, also appears once in Rhode Island's tax exemption records from 1789 to 1811. But never as residents, never as landowners, always as dependents, always without a household. The exemption forms were signed by a known Providence clerk, but the ink was different, brown-red instead of black, and in every case, his name was printed vertically in the margin, in the same hand used in the Foster ledger. Then, there's the baptismal record. St. Giles Parish kept meticulous archives under Reverend Isaac Morrow, a man known for strict penmanship and theological rigidity. His ink slanted backward. His lines were flawless. But one entry from August 14, 1793 breaks that order. It records the baptism of Elias Foster, son of Abram and Lydia, in good standing. Normal enough until restoration efforts in 1967 revealed something strange. Elaine Brackley, a conservator, attempted to separate the facing pages with a humidification tool. The ink from the opposing page, a baptism for a girl named Judith Kern, had bled through. But not just bled through. It had rewritten the Elias line. Judith's J had become an A. The other letters followed, and beneath Elias's name, faint but visible, was another. Owl. No scratch marks, no ink overlay, no evidence of tampering. As Brackley wrote, the page absorbed the second name, not by pressure but by prolonged contact. A passive redrafting. Reverend Morrow was questioned in 1801. He denied editing the entry. In a letter now held at the Diocesan Archive in Newport, he said the child's name was Elias. I remember, for he cried without tears. No edits were made. If the parchment bears a second name, it is not mine, nor to my knowledge his. But the contradictions persist. At the bottom of the baptismal entry lies a wax seal, unbroken crisp. It bears the parish insignia, but its color is wrong. It's reddish with flecks of ochre, a blend not used by the church until 1812, nearly 20 years after the record was made. Worse still, the seal is unsigned. Parish law required all amendments, no matter how minor, to be countersigned by clergy in the margins. There is no signature, just 4 faint graphite words in the spine gutter, barely visible in angled light. Let the fold decide. The handwriting didn't match Muros, nor Brackley, nor any conservator known to have touched the register. And yet, when the book is closed, the names Elias and Owl, inked in separate hands on opposing pages, align perfectly. Letter for letter, edge to edge across the seam, the binding had been tested. No looseness, no shift, and still. The names moved when pressed, not visibly, but subtly. And stranger still, on humid days, the second name appeared first. By the summer of 1804, Rhode Island had founded its newest academic venture, the Academy of Survey and Natural Proportion, a short-lived institution that would in time be absorbed into Brown University's Department of Geodesy. That summer, a junior cartographer by the name of Silas Leary was dispatched to resurvey a series of neglected plots northeast of Providence. The order came after two bitter land disputes involving Lot 14, an awkward slice of forest boundary that refused to resolve itself on paper. Leary was no outdoorsman. His journals, now housed in the university's archives of early cartographic science, are littered with complaints about weatherboot's mosquitoes. But his sketches, exquisite, precise, ink-thin, algebraically labeled, and curiously, never revised. Lot 14 appears in only one line of his formal report: uninhabited cabin, frame intact, orientation offset from plat. But the notebook found among his personal effects decades later, donated in a wool satchel by his nephew, tells a different story. The entries begin on August 11th. He described the old cabin, its walls warped with age moss, climbing the roofline, the ore tasting, in his words, metallic in the northeast corner. He took out his brass calipers, a standard surveyor's tool, and began triangulating the structure's dimensions. His first 3 points returned true, but the fourth, the northwest edge, resisted. The caliper legs slipped mid-measurement. He reset, checked the angle, tried again. They shifted, reversed, tightened on their own without pressure. He placed them gently on a flat rock beside the cabin. When he returned, the legs were locked shut. There are no further notes that day, but one map survives. Dated August 5th, oddly before the journal entry, it charts the surrounding plots with the kind of obsessive precision that made Leary's work so valuable. Tree lines, parcel borders, even faint elevation marks. And yet, Lot 14 remains blank. No cabin, no outline. Just a perfect empty rectangle. A deliberate absence. Archivists reviewing the map in 1902 noticed something strange. Faint impressions beneath the parchment, as though an outline had once been traced, then lifted, not scraped away, but withdrawn, as if the structure was never there, or had simply stepped back. On the back of the map, in crude charcoal script, likely added later by Leary's nephew, was a warning: uncertain property. Do not insert. No explanation was entered into university records. But in 1938, during a restoration of retired instruments, Leary's brass calipers were found in a long unused drawer. A curator cleaning them noticed something odd. The engraved numerals on the inner leg used to measure distance were backward, as though mirrored from within. And yet, when tested on curved surfaces, the readings held true. Flat paper, however, always came up short. One archivist called it a defect. Another left a penciled note beside the original map. The structure didn't fail measurement. It simply didn't need ours. There was no signature, only a single circled number 5. Meanwhile, tucked into the rear vault of the Providence Township Records Office, there sits an old household accounting book. Its catalogue reads simply, Foster A 1793-1799. Its cover is unmarked calfskin. The binding, stitched in copper thread, a sign perhaps of wealth. or borrowed skill. Most ledgers of the time followed a 4-column format: date, item, quantity, value. But this one had 5. The 5th column had no label, no units, no heading. And yet, every single row over 600 entries contains something in that final space or a name. Sometimes common, sometimes nearly illegible, always written in the same fine hand along a faint margin line. The rest of the book tracks a modest life oats, salt boots rope, crops traded, quantities marked, prices consistent with township records. And yet, none of the names in that 5th column appear more than once. The first, Ellsworth R. Why would a household ledger keep a list of names unrelated to its goods? Why did no one write about Lot 14 again, despite its glaring absence? And why do certain shapes like a 5th wall seem to resist not only measurement, but memory itself? We'll follow those questions further in the next chapter, dear listener. And when you're ready, we'll keep going. Slowly, quietly, together. Sleepy History Tales. The second entry simply reads MF. The third, Jonas. From that point onward, the names in the 5th column begin to fragment, then dissolve. Surnames vanish. Some are reduced to cryptic initials, VF Loy, for instance, while others resemble full names, but something feels off. Their phonetics are strained unnatural, like remnants of colonial dialects or the echo of names never meant to be spoken aloud. Kalami, Nest, Hall, and Wade. Archivist Hiram Lefferts, the first to examine the ledger in 1897 during a township re-indexing effort, left a field note that still unsettles historians today. He wrote, "Every page complete, every entry accurate, and yet I find myself disturbed by the presence of the 5th column. It is as though one were keeping a guestbook beside a purchase log." A historian in 1933 attempted to trace the names against Rhode Island's known family records, baptisms, land grants, burial records. None matched. None. Except for a single anomaly. A woman named Judith Aaron appears in a Salem court dispute over maritime inheritance in 1768. But here's the catch. The handwriting in that court log doesn't match the ledger. It's sharper, tighter, the product of a different hand. The Foster ledger script, however, is smooth, continuous, as if written in one breath by one person. And that person wasn't Abram Foster. His authenticated 1795 tax signature is labored clumsy. Whoever recorded the 5th column had a precision that comes with years of disciplined repetition, someone trained but hidden. One particular entry stands out: October 12, 1795. Item 1 flour. Quantity 1. Value 2D. Notes none. Name Leary Silas. Now pause here with us for a moment. Leary Silas would later become a university cartographer, the same one who visited the cabin 9 years after that entry. But in 1795, Silas would have been just 11 years old, living in Warren, some 30 miles away. There are no records, no accounts, no family law, suggesting he ever visited Providence as a child. And yet, there he is. A faint smudge appears beside the line, barely visible, but under magnification it resembles the upper curve of a wax seal. Not the emblem itself, just the border, as if something had been stamped and then instantly pulled away, leaving only the memory of its edge. Today, the ledger is stored behind UV-filtered glass, protected since 1971. And still under direct light, the 5th column behaves differently. The ink shimmers faintly. The texture slightly glossier, almost resistant to air, like it was meant to be read from another angle, or under a different kind of light entirely. Now lean in a little closer for this part. On the morning of May 4th, 1812, a janitor at the Providence County Register's office found a clerk, Thomas Mero, sitting motionless at a rear table. The lamps were unlit despite the early hour. His ink well had tipped, soaking through the parchment. His hands stained black. The pen was still between his fingers, but dry. Mero had come in the night before to clear a backlog of property filings and marriage certificates routine work. He was meticulous to a fault, but instead of his expected stack of filings, only one sheet sat before him. A marriage certificate. It recorded a fifth foster child, Nora F., aged 19. No parental names. No record of her ever appearing in any census church registry or township record. The certificate had been witnessed by Mero himself, though he claimed he had no memory of writing it. In the clergy field, Mero had written something no clerk had ever entered before, witnessed by the absent. The signature was his unmistakably, but the pressure was unusually deep. The strokes heavy, almost indented into the page. Decades later, forensic analysts would describe it as written with a reluctant grip pressed from above. When asked by his superior, Mero tried to explain. He remembered opening the folio. He remembered dipping the pen. But the name, he swore it was already there, half written. He had merely finished it, feeling in his own words as though I was completing something I hadn't started but already knew. That testimony still exists. A line from his statement was circled twice in red pencil. It felt like reading aloud, something I hadn't seen before, but already knew. The document wasn't destroyed, but it was quietly archived under a special heading, Anomalous Entries, Non-Counter BLE. And that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. 8 years later, during a complete recataloguing of the county's marriage bonds, the same sheet reappeared, filed under a new name. This time it listed Nathaniel Foster as the groom, but the bride's name was smeared overwritten in graphite. Below the name were two short red lines. Not Mero's style, not any known clerk's, but the most chilling detail was the second signature on that sheet. It was nearly identical to Mero's, but slanted the opposite direction. Not forged, not disguised, just mirrored. A handwriting analyst in 1956 reviewed it and concluded the writing was done by the same mind, but through a different muscle memory, a mirror of self. Thomas Mero resigned 2 years later. The official cause: nervous strain and uncertain habits of penmanship. He was never disciplined, and that certificate, it remains intact to this day. Today, the document rests untouched in a locked drawer. Third cabinet middle row in the office of the Providence Register. The drawer is wedged between two empty folders. No one remembers locking it. No one admits to having a key, but carved faintly into the inside lip of the drawer as if scratched in desperation or warning are 5 letters SPARE. No one knows who etched them. No record explains why they're there. And so we return to 1815. Lydia Foster was dead, and the cabin on Lot 14, already withering into rot, was left for inventory. The task fell to a local witness named Elias Randall, who entered the structure by law, tasked only with logging items of value and submitting claims for any unsecured tools or household goods. The house by that point was little more than a ruin. 2 straw mattresses, a battered copper kettle, and beneath the loft stairs, almost overlooked, stood a cedar writing desk. Narrow, handmade, unmarked. At first glance, completely unremarkable. Randall noted 4 drawers. The top ones too shallow, the lower too deep. When he pulled at the bottom left, it jammed halfway. He tugged harder. The backboard dislodged just slightly, revealing a hollow seam, hidden but not locked. A falls back, but no latch, no hinges, just wood, dry, featureless. Behind it, something shifted. A 5th drawer slid forward, not pulled, not opened. It emerged as if on its own weight. It was narrower than the rest. Rough-hewn, unfinished. Inside, a coil of coarse horsehair, tightly bundled, knotted in looping patterns like a primitive rosary. Woven through the horsehair were names. 22 in all. Not written, carved. Each name gouged into the strands with something sharp and crude, an iron nail perhaps. The kind used in shingle thatching. Some names were familiar to the region, Noyes Addington Perrin, but others had no trace in any census ledger or church record. Names like Lathmel Drum. They didn't appear in the Foster family records. Not in the township archives. Not anywhere. Randall documented each one in his statement. He returned the coil to its drawer. But it was how he found that drawer that caught attention decades later. His official probate record simply states that a glare from the western light forced him to change position, and that in doing so, the drawer became visible. But a private letter discovered much later among Randall's estate papers tells a different version. He claimed that the 5th drawer could only be seen from one specific spot. Inside the cabin, standing against the eastern wall shoulder just past the hearth turned slightly. With your back to what he called the 5th corner. That phrase, 5th corner, was dismissed at the time as nothing more than an eccentric carpenter's idiom. But floor plans preserved by the Providence Historical Society show something troubling. There was no 5th corner. The cabin had 4 walls, 4 corners, and yet Randall insisted. From that vantage, it was there. The drawer extended outward, already open. I didn't pull it. I only saw it once. In 1874, the desk was reviewed again during a routine municipal inventory. It was still there, but the 5th drawer was gone. In its place, a solid cedar backing, nailed flush. No sign of tampering, except one nail was loose, and beneath its head, scratched so faintly it was missed for decades, was a single name. N. Foster. Not Elias, not Nathaniel. Just the initial. And next to it, a looping glyph, a character that doesn't exist in the Latin alphabet. A twisted knot of ink repeating on itself like a seam sealed shut. In 1872, the Providence Historical Preservation Society began selecting structures for replication colonial dwellings that could be rebuilt for display in the city's newly expanded museum. Among those selected, the Foster cabin, by then dismantled and stored piece by piece beneath the grist mill. The cabin's reconstruction was assigned to a respected local architect named Aldous Faircombe. Faircombe was known for his exacting eye. At 46 years old, he had published essays in the Rhode Island Builder Quarterly, taught joinery at the local guild, and had never missed a tax filing. His instructions were simple draft full elevation plans, floor layouts, and sectional drawings of the foster cabin for the museum's folk-dwelling wing. Only one problem: the cabin was never rebuilt. And of all Faircomb's files, only one folio survived, labeled simply Lot 14 Replica, Unbuilt. Inside were meticulous renderings, 4 elevations, a corner, joinery cross-section, a loft layout, and then something else. A floor plan dated March 19, 1873. Ink and graphite. All 4 walls clearly drawn, but the interior angles did not align to 90 degrees. In the margin, a single note, 5th turn, viewed internally. No such term exists in architectural drafting. And when museum staff attempted to trace the drawing back through Faircomb's employment file, the record was gone. No termination, no resignation, no listing of his address on Carr Street ever again. He had simply vanished. His name does not appear on that year's payroll, nor does it appear on the official list of contributors maintained by the Rhode Island State Heritage Museum. But things began to get strange in 1921 when a research team contacted Aldous Farcom's descendants for clarification ahead of an upcoming exhibition. The response they received put all writing to rest. The Farcom family insisted he had never been an architect. His surviving nephew, a shoemaker in Middletown, said Aldous had been a carpenter as a young man, but had given up the trade by 1860. There are no family letters mentioning any architectural projects, no photographs of him at construction sites, no indication that he was ever given any blueprints. And yet, his signature was clearly visible in the lower right corner of the 5th drawing. Brown ink, the same type as the notes on the other plans. Below the signature was a number of 112, not a page number, not a technical index, but when checked against the project personnel list, 112 matched another name, Orland Wilkes, who had died in 1871, many years before the project began. An internal memo from the 1934 inventory read simply, "Drawing signed Faircom Inc., authentic but numbered by Wilkes. Executor unknown. Recommendation withhold from exhibition. That exhibition was never built." The foster cabin and the entire restoration plan was sent back to storage. And then in 1986, while an engineering team was installing a new air conditioning system for the archives, a worker found a thin roll of drawings tucked into the back of a display case, labeled housing drafts, unused. Inside was a copy of the 5th floor drawings, still intact. The ink was still legible. But this time, the signature was gone. In its place was a single dash handwritten. And in the corner of the drawing, a faint red ink mark that almost blended into the grain of the paper. 3 quiet lines, not built, not filed, not returned, and on the back, in pencil, a single word, spared. If you're watching this at midnight, sit up straight, because this is where things start to go off spec. In the fall of 1912, the Providence Historical Museum completed the move of the foster cabin from its temporary barn on the farm to the museum's new exhibition basement. It was part of a larger campaign to preserve colonial-era structures too fragile to display, but too precious to destroy. The foster cabin, though rotten and crumbling in parts, was taken apart, board by board, and rebuilt on a polished granite foundation. a foundation cast specifically for it. The dimensions were calculated to the exact inch, including the shrinkage of the wood due to weathering. The floor was level. The foundation was up to standard. But just 3 months later, the complaints began. Edwin Toller, assistant curator, noted that the floor tilted slightly to the east, especially near the back corner of the cabin. A visiting lecturer noted that the photo taken from the northwest corner looked pulled down to the right, checked with a plumb line and a spirit level. No errors. The following February, the museum installed mercury thermometers at the 4 corners of the cabin to study the climate. All 3 corners were 68 degrees. But at the junction of the east wall and the back beam, what the staff called the strange crack, the thermometer read 58 degrees. Another one was placed next to it, identical reading. Another one mounted on the same beam, still 58 degrees. No vents, no moisture. Completely dry stone floor. 6 months later, during a heat wave, the temperature of the entire gallery rose, but that corner remained as cold as ever. The curator's notes began to record descriptions. The visitor felt off balance when standing in the back corner. I put the metal plate on the floor and it drifted toward that corner by itself, very slowly but steadily. The tilt of the floor was checked again. Nothing unusual was found. In 1927, the museum tested a new device called a tilt sensor, the ancestor of the modern deflectometer placed near the strange gap. The needle stopped slightly to the east, then jerked once, then stopped. No more movement. The device was put into storage. And in that year's exhibition diary, next to the entry, Foster Cabin, someone wrote in pencil, "The foundation stone is still, the air is still, but that corner is moving." What do you think of this detail? One corner of the room can move while everything else remains still. Hold that thought. Because what happens next will take us to a place that is no longer mapped. Even now, the Foster Cabin remains locked away, viewable only through a pane of humidity-controlled glass. For decades, it has been declared too unstable for public exhibition. But those who've tried to explain why often find themselves trailing off, as if words themselves refuse to follow them inside. A motion sensor installed in 1999 as part of a security update was quietly deactivated just a month later. It had triggered 47 times, always between 2:00 and 3:15 a.m. Not once did the cameras show movement. Not once did the logs detect entry. And yet, something or someone was setting it off. In 2007, a visiting engineering student scanned the subfloor with a precision laser leveling tool. The cabin's foundation poured granite was confirmed level by every measure except for one spot. Beneath the cabin's so-called fifth corner, there was a dip, only 1.2 inches but unmistakable, unaccounted for. A deviation when none should exist. That same beam during a mold inspection, years earlier, had revealed a faint inscription etched in the stone below. Just one word remained. Let's go back just for a moment to the winter of 1933. By then, the Foster Cabin had already sat disassembled and unexhibited for over 20 years. It was stored beneath the Providence Historical Museum, its timbers, labeled and preserved, waiting for a future that never seemed to come. But in January, a soft-spoken curator named Leonard Whitlow was assigned to conduct a full inventory of the structure's contents. He wasn't new to this kind of work, an architectural historian with a habit of working alone, and a sketchbook that rarely left his hands. Whitlow was methodical. He didn't just measure, he drew. pen graphite, even charcoal when the angles felt off. His colleagues described him as quiet particular. They say he signed out the cabin's sub-level key at 5:42 p.m. on January 14th. He never signed it back in. There's no record of him leaving the museum. No witness account. Nothing on the exit log. But early the next morning, his satchel was discovered hidden behind a warped riser on the reconstructed staircase, nearly wedged out of sight. Inside was his leather-bound sketchbook, water-damaged and curling at the edges. At first, the drawings appear ordinary. Elevation diagrams, notes on floorboard tension. Typical for a structural review. But halfway through, the sketches shift. Dramatically. 5 portraits. Each one shows the Foster family seated stiffly around their hearth parents, children dressed in late 18th century garb. The compositions are nearly identical in layout, but in every sketch, one figure, always the far right figure, is violently scratched out. Not erased, scored, deeply, frantically, and always in the same place. In some, the figure is seated, in others, standing behind the group. But the position never changes, and the pressure of the graphite, furious and deliberate, is unmistakably Whitlow's. None of the portraits name this person. But on the third sketch, written faintly in the margin, is a chilling note. Spare 5th seat facing east. Light wrong here. Whitlow's handwriting. Confirmed. And on the inventory form he'd begun, item 37 stands out. A cedar chair, simple, unremarkable. Listed not beside the hearth or window, but placed beside the 5th wall. There is no 5th wall in any official diagram of the cabin. There never has been. Whitlow was never found. His home remained untouched, every personal belonging in place. But that spring, the museum quietly closed off the cabin's sub-level, officially citing structural safety. Unofficially, the incident was never discussed. The sketchbook was archived, restricted from public view. A handful of curators were allowed to examine it over the years, and they all say the same thing. The final portrait, the 5th, is the most disturbing. The face is gouged so severely that the paper is pierced, and the next page underneath has 5 faint letters indented by pressure, only visible when held against the light FOE. That word "foe" appears nowhere else in Whitlow's writing. And strangely, his name has since been removed from the museum's cabin assignment logs, as if he was never part of the project at all. We could end there. But history has a way of surfacing even when buried. In 1963, a new initiative began digitizing Rhode Island's colonial church records. Baptisms, weddings, deaths. Archival work slow and silent. One of the earliest volumes chosen was the 1793 baptism ledger from St. Giles Parish, a worn, creased manuscript infamous for its blotched seals and uneven script. During routine folio separation, an archivist named Harold Dunn made a discovery tucked into the binding beneath the August entries. A brittle envelope, yellowed, crumbling. Its wax seal a dull, dried red. No crest, no signature. Only a faint ring scored into the wax like a fingerprint dragged in reverse. We'll pick it up from there in the next section. But if you're still with me, dear listener, let me ask, what do you think that 5th wall hides? And more importantly, why would someone build a room that knows you're looking at it? Stay with us. Sleepy history tales will return. To this day, the Foster cabin remains untouched, its 5th corner, sealed in silence, its stairwell unwalked since 1933. The humidity-controlled glass that surrounds it now does little to contain the feeling, that slight stomach-dropping tilt when you get too close to the east-facing beam, the one that dips ever so slightly despite the stone below being level. Visitors are not told of the dip, nor of the word remain etched faintly beneath it, almost as if it knew something would. The sketchbook of Leonard Whitlow, officially missing, is still housed in a restricted vault beneath the Providence Historical Museum. Archivists are no longer permitted to handle it without supervision. Most won't go near it at all. Some say if you look closely at the ghost letters beneath the final page, what we thought said FOE, there's another possibility. It could be face. A face torn through 5 times in 5 iterations. One face that could not be drawn, or could not be remembered, or should not be. And then there's the envelope. Unmarked, uncrested. Recovered from a church ledger sewn in 1793, the very year the cabin was constructed. Its contents remain sealed to this day. Not for lack of curiosity, but by institutional order. The Rhode Island Historical Society issued a formal directive in 1997 that the wax is not to be broken. No forensic lab, no opening. Not now, not ever. When asked their only explanation, its contents are no longer relevant to public interest. And yet, here we are, wondering. Still, a sealed envelope, a vanished curator, a crooked beam beneath a 5th corner that shouldn't exist, a missing face scored out by the very hand that first gave it shape. You may be wondering, as I did, who was the 5th person? What was in that letter? Why did the cabin tilt? Not in structure but in time. The answer, if there is one, seems to be this. Some walls are not meant to stand. Some rooms were never meant to be entered. And some names, once etched too deeply, do not fade. They simply remain. Thank you for spending this strange and unsettling hour with us. If stories like this haunt your curiosity the way they haunt ours, consider subscribing to Sleepy History Tales. We unearth what others forget, and we whisper what history dares not write down. Sleep soundly tonight if you can. And if you ever hear something tapping just past the 4th wall, don't look for the 5th. Good night.